Do you know what a non-traditional career is? A non-traditional career is any one in which a single gender represents less than 25% of the total number of workers. There are non-traditional careers for both men and women. Here are some examples, though this is not an exhaustive list. Women are underrepresented in engineering, auto mechanics, electricians, computer scientists, law enforcement, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, fire management, construction management, culinary arts, and welding. Men are underrepresented in massage therapy, nursing, early childhood education, cosmetology, dental hygienists, and bookkeeping. One of the root causes for why people don't pursue and persist in non traditional pathways is a lack of role models. This is related to self efficacy, the belief one has in their ability to complete a task. One of the sources of self efficacy is vicarious experiences or the observation of models. Seeing someone perform a task or meeting someone who looks like them, who's in a career or pathway, can over time increase someone's belief that they can do a task and increase a sense of belonging. In this series, I interview people who have pursued careers in non traditional pathways. I hope that you will be inspired by their stories. Emily, welcome. I'm so glad that you've joined me today. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your current job and where you live and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Emily Jaramillo, and I am kind of a New Mexico native. I was born in California, but my parents moved out to New Mexico when I was 3. And I grew up in Thoreau, New Mexico, which is a very small town in between Grants and Gallup. And I left the state for college and went to Luther College in Iowa. I was ready for a change. I don't know why I picked Iowa, but I did. And I actually played basketball there and ran track there, and then got my degree in English education. And I spent the first part of my career up until like the first 5 years of my career teaching English. I ultimately moved back home to New Mexico and taught English at the Juvenile Detention Center. And I coached track at Del Norte. And while I was a teacher, I had a guest speaker in my classroom from the fire department. And he was there to talk to my students about a career in the fire service. And one of his points was that they had had several years where they weren't able to hire women because women were either not interested, they just didn't have a lot of big pool, and or they weren't able to pass the physical fitness testing. And I was kind of at that point in my career where I wasn't sure that I had made the right choice, and it sparked my interest. And so that kind of leads me to where I am today. I ended up testing for the fire department 16 years ago, and I currently hold the title at AFR, at Albuquerque Fire Rescue, of Deputy Chief. So I answer to the fire chief here, and I oversee all of our emergency medical services. So about 87% of what firefighters do is respond to medical calls. When someone calls 911 with a medical emergency, we respond. And so that's what I oversee here at Albuquerque Fire.
That's fantastic. And so, you mentioned that you had somebody come and talk and you had a guest speaker. And so here you are doing the same today. And so, what sort of advice would you offer to students who are considering pathways and potentially a pathway that challenges their gender norms or into a non traditional pathway?
Yeah, so I think that, growing up, and I even had a grandfather that was a retired firefighter. And I'll speak specifically to what I do, but I think this would carry over to any career that kind of has those inequities in gender. I never thought of this as a career for myself, even though I was very active, very athletic. I really like physical challenges, but it was just not any, in the media, when you watched movies back then, and even today, you see men in that role. You hear firefighter, and when I first took this job, actually, my mom was like, well, what do I call you? I can't call you a fireman. And I was like, it's a firefighter. Firewoman sounds weird. So it's firefighter. But you didn't see that as a profession growing up. And so when I had the guest speaker, I think, and it was a male in my class. And I think that, just the fact that he even mentioned, that we're trying to actively recruit women, that was the first time I thought about, like, listening to him talk to my students. I was like, everything he said about the career was things that I thought I would like to do myself. And so even though it probably, obviously different gender there, but he really like that kind of reached out to me, or he kind of spoke to me at that point in my life. And so I think just being open-minded, especially when you are interacting and learning about these professions, there's a lot of challenges that come with working in a profession where, in my case, it's very male dominant. 95% of our department is male, and we have a little over 700 firefighters. So there's a lot of challenges that come with that. But I think that just listening to them. And I think part of it was him also speaking about specifically, like, we want more women in our department, really was helpful at that point.
So you mentioned that your grandfather was a firefighter, and so that certainly gives you a role model. And role models are really important for us to see ourselves in any kind of career, but it's particularly impactful for women seeing themselves in non-traditional careers. And the research is pretty clear that it's usually some kind of male figure. Like, my dad's a computer scientist and engineer, so is my grandfather, and that's sort of how I found my path in there. And so besides your grandfather, can you think of and describe any other people that, and you could certainly describe him as well, who became your role models, and how did you seek out more role models for yourself?
Specific to once I got in the fire department, or prior to, or both?
As it relates to you pursuing your
The
path
career.
in fire. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And, and that's it. It's a challenge because pretty much everybody that I interacted with prior to on my way through were male. And so I reached back out to him afterwards. I ended up in getting connected with an EMT class that was being taught, because you have to be an EMT at the time. You had to be an EMT to even get into the fire department, which I wasn't. And he put me in touch with the instructor here, who was one of my initial role models. And he was about to retire. He had been in the fire service for over 25 years. And he was my instructor for EMT class. And he was just, I felt very supported by him. And so I think, when we talk about role models, I think people automatically think, well, was your role model going into the fire service? Was it a female? And once I got in and met other female firefighters, I definitely had people that I connected with that were great role models for me. But leading up to my career, up until I got in, they were male, and they really just, it was just people that I connected with. So I think when you're looking for role models, they don't necessarily have to match your background or your experiences or your gender, your ethnicity, or anything like that. It sometimes is helpful, and I like to try to reach out to all of our female firefighters as a support system for them. But I think a lot of times your role models may not fit the mold that you kind of perceive that they should fit when you're seeking them out.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things that we advocate for students is to encourage them to seek out not only role models, but mentors. And it sounds like the gentleman, the instructor that you're talking about, likely served in some capacity as a mentor for you. And there's a lot of fear and like asking. And I think that students and people believe like mentors just sort of come to us. And that's not always the case, right? Like sometimes we have to go seek them, and then they help sort of bring us up throughout, as they're climbing. Can you give any talk to that, tips on how to ask for people to mentor you, or how you sort of stumbled across those relationships and then nurtured them?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've had kind of experience on both sides of that. So I think a lot of times mentorship, especially if you're around the same group, it kind of happens organically. So the fire chief that I currently work for is somebody he was an instructor during my cadet class, and I've worked with him in different capacities over the past 16 years, always with him in some type of supervisory role over me. And he's really grown to be like a mentor to me, somebody that I've been able to confide in very luckily for, 16 years. I think that's hard to come by because we may not work with the same people for that long or longer. But I also really encourage people to seek out mentors because you may not be in a capacity where it is happening organically. But I think and I've had that happen in my position where I've had firefighters come to me, both male and female, but come to me for advice, for for support through their career, and then and not necessarily outright ask, could you mentor me through this? But when they ask for that support, it's kind of obvious that they're looking for that. And so, if you're not comfortable with just saying, can you mentor me? I think that you can just ask for help in certain areas. And then that's kind of how that mentorship can kind of organically grow once somebody starts working with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks. So I want to talk a little bit about goals and failure, and I want to talk about them together because I think that they are deeply linked. And so share with me a little bit about some of the goals and how you use goal setting to help you progress, and in tandem with how you also use failure to help you learn and grow along the way.
Great. And I'll start that with, I'm a huge goal setter. I've been one my entire life, where I like to write them down and all of that kind of stuff. And I do truly believe that if you don't meet failure, then you're not setting your goals high enough. And to really challenge yourself, you have to be okay with understanding that there are going to be times that you fail, and that's okay. And you get stronger from that. So I think, goal setting, I mean, you can set goals through the day. That's how I manage my workload sometimes. So I'm really big on short and long-term goal setting. And I do it with my work, with the people that I work with in my division. I like them to have personal goals and professional goals, so that we know how we can support those. So I think, for young people that are starting out down their career path, identifying short and long-term goals is really important. And a long-term goal can take several years to reach, but really kind of having that idea in your mind of what that looks like. And then being okay with changing direction too. I mean, from being an English teacher to being a firefighter was not my ultimate plan when I started out college. And so my goals really shifted there too. But I think I'm a big believer in sitting down, writing them down, and then working towards those is really important. And then just linking that with, I sometimes feel like I've had more failures than I've had successes in my career. And I've had a very good career, and I've just really learned to have failure motivate me. So, when I've had a goal and I haven't been able to accomplish it, whether it was because I couldn't accomplish it, or I did everything I could and I still didn't meet that goal because of whatever was going on the outside that I had no control over. I think you deal with kind of initial disappointment. I think that's pretty natural. And then I regroup, and either I keep pushing forward with that, or I change that goal a little bit to maybe shift direction, but still kind of trying to reach that. But definitely, I like to encourage people not to be afraid of failure, because failure just makes you stronger.
Thank you. So I want to talk about your pivot. So the pivot from English teacher to firefighter, and talk about the pressure if there was any, from the outside world of like, what are you doing, and like how you really sort of push through to accomplish that goal and overcame some of the stereotypes to your entry point and then along the way.
Yeah. So I was really lucky when I had that pivot. And I was 26 when I started the career shift, and no family yet. I was single. And so my support system was just friends and family. And I had good support there. So that helped. I think my mom questioned it a little bit. I think she was worried because, it's a career that is a little bit, well, I don't want to say more dangerous than teaching, but, I think people, we're going into fires and there's a lot of unknown there. And once I got in, I definitely, and a lot of it was my own pressure that I had on myself. There wasn't very many women in our cadet class. There was 4 of us out of probably 35 people. And I think being in that obvious minority in the group, I think there was a lot of self pressure that I put on myself to perform the same as the men, because I didn't want to stick out. I also wanted them to know I could do the same job as them. Because the thing about this career is that, if we have to do something on a fire, whatever that is, a rescue, whatever, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, you have to be able to do the job. And so there was a lot of pressure that I put on myself. I think there's always, you look at a group and the women are obviously going to stick out because was not very many of us. And so I think there was some outside pressure there too, because we knew we were a little bit more on the radar, to see if we were going to be able to perform as well as the men could perform in our class. And I think that's natural. Those are things that motivate me though, because I am competitive, and so that really motivated me through the process is that I wanted to show that I was very capable, if not more capable than a lot of the other people that I was in the cadet class with.
So I'm curious, as a former competitive athlete myself, I'm curious how you used your background as a competitive athlete to support you in the journey of becoming a firefighter.
I think going back to goals, and even when I was, I think as a coach too, I really, you as an athlete, you're just setting goals for yourself. So I was a distance runner. I ran the 5K and the 10K in college, really long races that nobody wants to go watch. And so every week you were trying to improve, at the next meet. And so I think having that kind of competitive nature that I had through sports really helped me in this field. It was part of the motivation that I had. But I don't think that you have to be competitive to be successful either, because I work with a lot of people that are not competitive at all. They go out, they do a great job. They're not, and so I don't think you need that, but it definitely helped. It helped me when I was training. I was just really motivated. I wanted to come in, and it was, I was really driven by that competitive side where I was like, I want to get there and I want to be better than some of these guys on the first day. And it just motivated me.
I appreciate the distinction that it doesn't require everyone to be competitive. I appreciate that. I'm curious, I don't even know if this is a great question or not, but like, what do you see the impact of like shows like Station 19 with so many really awesome women on that show? How do you see that influencing your field in the future of the participation of women within firefighting?
So I really appreciate that a lot of these shows have a lot more women represented in their characters. I think the downside of those shows that I don't watch them just because I'm not really, it's what I do. So I'm like, that's not, I don't watch them too much, but I've seen them before. And I think the downside of a lot of the shows is like the drama side of it, like there's relationships, and they start dating each other and all of that kind of stuff. So it almost makes it look like this. I think it's great for the representation, but then sometimes I'm like, but it's really not that dramatic. Like, we're coming to work and we're doing our job, and living at a fire station isn't, all these different relationships in that capacity. We definitely have relationships with each other as far as coworkers and firefighting. You live together for 48 hours and then you go home for 4 days. So you have a different work relationship than you would in a traditional 9 to 5. But I do like seeing that representation, because I didn't have that in any shows, growing up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and you're right. There hopefully isn't as much drama as we see on those shows.
There isn't.
So, would you be willing to share maybe a specific story about maybe a bump along your journey? So you said you think that you'd had as many failures as you had successes, and I think it's really important to humanize those failures so that people can see the sort of tangible, the tangible nature of those things. Any
Yeah,
examples?
I do. And so there was a position that I really aspired to have in this department. And it was a captain position within our division. And you have to take a test to promote to each rank. And so we were studying I was a lieutenant. We were studying for this captain. And we knew that there was going to be these 2 positions opening up in a division that I really, really, really wanted to work in. It was like my goal in this department at that time in my life, that is where I wanted to be. And I had a newborn and I had a toddler at the time. And so a lot of just personal challenges with very young children and being a mom. I was breastfeeding. And I was still working, obviously. So we're studying for this test, and I was working super hard for that. And so it was a position that was determined by several different people, that to be selected into this group, a cadre, and then they had those roles, those captain roles. So I was working really hard, and I knew it was going to be competitive because there were some other people that were fighting for that job also that I was testing against. So, so when we took our test, I ended up doing better on the test than my main competition for that I felt like I had at the time for that job. And I found out at the meeting where they were determining who they were going to put into that position that it was said by some of the people selecting that they didn't think that I had the right temperament to do that job, which I found was interesting. It was a very type A position in our job. It was like an EMS shift supervisor position. So they just oversaw all of our officers on that shift, and they went to all the really, really high profile calls. And so I thought that was an interesting choice of words to use, that I didn't have the right temperament. And I saw the writing on the wall that I was probably not going to get selected for that position. And I think I had worked so hard for that position, and for it to come down to people's opinion about me that maybe didn't know me very well was a little bit frustrating. And so I felt super discouraged. And, but knowing that, I just kept on working hard. They hadn't made the selection yet. And then around that same time was when the fire chief actually asked me to take my current position as the deputy chief. And the irony of that is I now oversee that position. And so, I was really disappointed, but I wasn't going to let it stop me. That I knew, and I was just going to keep working for it at that time. And I also think the other important thing was I couldn't control what they thought about me at that point, the people that were making that selection. And I wasn't going to let that control my reaction and how I was going to keep moving forward. So I was very disappointed. I was upset. I was frustrated that somebody said that about me, and that was going to ultimately lead to me not getting that position. But I just also wasn't going to let that kind of stop me from moving forward.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I don't know if it's a gift or not that you heard that, right? Because so often those conversations happen in spaces where we don't hear and we don't get to have any kind of view or inside scoop of understanding what kinds of bias people might have against us and assumptions.
Yep.
So I think that there are a lot of young people. I remember when I was young and trying to figure out which pathway, I would ask women about the whole how do you juggle it all kind of thing. And I now laugh at that question, but it was important to me when I was young. And so, and you already mentioned that you had a couple of children. And so talk a little bit about that and what it's like for you to be a mom. And as you climbed your career and as you're in a really, important position today, what does that look like to you?
I mean, it's definitely a challenge to navigate everything. I think if you talk to any working, especially any working mother, regardless of the profession, is very hard to juggle. I just saw something the other day that said, you know, 9 to 5, 40-hour work weeks were designed for somebody to be at home where with someone else at home doing the childcare, the laundry, the cooking, the cleaning, all of that. And I think especially for working women, I mean, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of expectation. Some of it's self-induced also on and I was just talking to a father on my staff whose wife is doing her surgical residency right now. It's another field that is very male dominated is surgery. And they have a baby that's not yet one. And I was just talking about like the pressure that you have as a working mom. Some of it's self-induced, but there's, it sometimes it makes you feel really guilty that your kids might be in daycare and if I was a stay-at-home mom, I would be the one raising my kids. But I think a lot of that was pressure I put on myself and not necessarily pressure from the outside. And I think just how you juggle that is you have to really, goal setting again, but like learning how to prioritize what's important. And so for me, my children come first, and I've had to learn. And I was really bad at it when I first took this position, but I've had to learn that what can wait till tomorrow and what do I have to address today? Because I'm pretty much, we work 24/7. So if something comes up that's emergent, I have to be available for phone calls and things like that, even in the middle of the night. But a lot of the work that I get can wait till the next day. So I don't, even though emails are rolling in to me after 5 o'clock, I don't necessarily have to respond to those, and I can still have my family time, enjoy my kids. And so I've just really learned to set boundaries for myself about where my responsibilities are. If it's something I have to take care of that takes away from family time, that's what it does. But those are not as common as the other work that can wait till the next day. And then I think the other thing too with those and with prioritizing when you're really busy is I always tell my people, not, just find time that where you're wasting time, don't waste that time. So like when I'm at work, I try to stay really focused to get everything that I can do when I'm on the clock, when I'm not with my kids, so that I'm not taking that home to where I'm going to have to work on that after hours. So I try to minimize my distractions at work so that I don't take that home with me. But I think setting boundaries and priorities are super important.
Yeah, thanks. So, tell me just sort of last thoughts to any student who's considering a career pathway and just sort of final thoughts that you'd offer.
Sure. I mean, I think all career pathways are challenging. I think when you take on these non-traditional career pathways, there's an added level of challenges that you will face. And as you navigate those, you might really have successes and you might have those failures. But if you stay motivated, if it's what you really want to do, I truly believe that people can accomplish what they set out to do if they just keep that motivation and stay at it and don't quit. And the other thing too that I've had to learn over the years is to not worry about what people think about me. I know that I work hard. I know what I do is right. I know I'm making, ethical. I have morals. I'm doing the right thing. I work hard, and and this is in any profession. If you have people that are, naysayers, or especially as you climb up the ladder, is just not to worry about what other people think about you. As long as if you're always doing the right thing, you don't have to worry about what people think about you.